Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is the Tool of Farts. I'm Chuck.
And I'm Lou. How you doing?
I'm trying to stay warm. It's kind of cold outside.
It's more than nippy. And your
It
mom's like and your mom's like you. She wants to keep that house in the daytime she keeps it at 71. At night we put it at 70. And I'm okay with the 70 with the sleeping.
oh yeah, I like it cold to sleep.
But 71 in the daytime gets me. So I got my long
Is
sleeve
that too hot?
new. I got my long sleeve shirt on. I got a thermal undershirt, long sleeve underneath it. And my socks. I don't usually wear socks.
Yeah,
And then
it's about 36 degrees outside right now. 40
it's
degrees.
going, it's going to get cold tonight. I was looking at the weather all across that lower southeast Florida, Georgia. Well, they're in for some rough times the next couple of days.
Yep, where I used to live in Kansas, man, it's in the teens right there.
Yeah, and they're saying that snow all the way down to Panama City. Boy, Panama
Man,
City gets snow. It's cold.
yeah, man,
You
I'm
won't be able to
alive.
decide which is the beach, the sand or the snow.
That is crazy, man. And normally we don't get weather like this until February.
Yeah. So, but we're ready for it. And stuff like this is really not good for wildfires. And that's something I told you we're going to talk about, a little bit.
Yeah,
Stuff gets dry this time of the year. We're not getting the rain or in the right places or right parts of the country and stuff like that.
yeah. It looks like it's getting worse with the wind. Like
Exactly.
like it's not gonna get any better because of the wind.
And that's the main culprit is the wind. There's a lot of things you can do to control, but when that wind gets out of control, there's a lot of things you just can't do. You can't fly the planes, and in some instances, drop retardants and those kind of things, and it's just hard to control because the wind changes direction, it blows up those embers and stuff like that. And next thing you know, especially, that's just like yesterday. Some of the stuff I want to talk about here, I got out and mulched the leaves in because we have an oak tree in the front and the back, and the back hadn't started dropping yet. It'll start about the latter part of this month and next month. But in the front, and then the neighbor, she has an Arizona ash. Well, this leaves with that deep in a couple parts of where I keep my trash bins and stuff. So I got all those up, and of course in the front by the drop mailbox and stuff like that. But I mulched the leaves in her front yard as well as most of them in my front yard because the mulch will be harder to burn than if you have just the dry leaves out there. Because the dry leaves will lay there and then it'll smolder and then it spreads. And so,
Not
anyway,
to mention what kind of critters can live underneath those leaves.
yeah, you're right. But
It's too
anyway, you know
cold for
what
Jake the
causes
snake.
kind of, yeah, I don't worry about snakes too much this time of year, but you might find one. Had a skunk in the backyard the other night. So
Oh yeah?
about 10 o'clock at night. We have three cats that pretty much every day I'm going to see them. There's a gray one, there's a kind of a yellow orange type one, then there's that black cat I see every day, front and backyard. Of course, your mom, she puts out the bird feed, so that's going to attract.
It's gonna attract the skunks.
Yeah. So anyway, wildfires is estimated that 90% of all wildfires across the globe are caused by humans. I don't think that's a surprise. About
I wouldn't
30% of those are started as a deliberate act of arson, while 70% are started accidentally or as a direct result of human carelessness. So, what states have the most wildfires here in the United States?
probably California and Texas, I
California,
would
number
say.
one, with 9,280. Texas, number two, 5,576. North Carolina, 5,151. Montana with 2,573. Florida, 2,262. Oregon, 2,202. Georgia, 2,139. Minnesota, 2,065. What does all those states have in common?
Nothing.
Oh, yes, they do.
What?
A lot of lot of brush, a lot of forest. Is really what I'm saying when you look at forest, and then they also most of those states are pretty heavily populated. Texas, California, North Carolina. Well, Montana is not so much,
Or Minnesota.
or Minnesota, but Georgia, Oregon, Florida, a lot of
Even Oregon's not that heavily populated. It's very concentrated in areas, I would
yeah,
think.
but they have a lot because of the vegetation, the wildlife, the forest, stuff like that. Four things you need for a fire.
Three things:
Four.
oxygen,
Oxygen,
an ignition source,
heat,
and fuel.
right. And the other one, which I didn't know this was because I've always thought three things for a fire: chemical chain reaction, the ongoing reaction between fuel and oxygen that sustains the fire. If you remove any one of those elements, you'll extinguish a fire. So, fuel, the combustion material that burns; heat, the energy needed to initiate the combustion material process; oxygen, the gas that supports combustion; then chemical chain reaction. And that's the problem with most wildfires is that chemical chain reaction because you have all that underbrush and undergrowth and stuff like that, and that cause it to spread and continue and probably spread faster. Those states we just talked about, what else do they have in common with the weather?
A lot of weather extremes, I would think.
Exactly, like
Extreme
wind,
heat, extreme cold.
dry,
It can
droughts,
be.
and especially a lot of wind, especially if you look at West Coast and look at Texas too. Really, we're in that area where it comes down. We start getting a lot of the winds from California. That area starts coming down. So to prevent wildfires, there's some safe practice activities that you need and maintain your property. Be aware of local regulations. That's one. Yesterday I was telling you I went out and I did some because the leaves were getting really heavy between our house and our neighbor's house, and so I took care of all of that and then mulched around in her front yard and stuff like that. Her backyard, our backyard, there's not much there, so it would probably be easy to contain with a hose or something like that. But safe outdoor campfires, you need to start a campfire in a fire pit. Don't leave it unattended. Make sure it's completely out before you leave. Fireworks is one of the biggest ones. And that was here
I
in
believe
January.
that.
That was a concern with me at midnight, and then they keep on going and stuff like that. You need to have a bucket of water or a fire extinguisher nearby if you're going to and wet the grass down before leaving fireworks. Smoking cigarette butts and stuff like that. Outdoor burning.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to do it, you need to make sure it's permitted, burn safely with proper tools and supervision. You want to remove flammable vegetation. That's what I was talking about with the leaves, those dry leaves and stuff. Because they get so compact, something could start it and they'll smolder for a long period of time. You may not be aware of it. The next thing you know, something moves and gets a little bit more air or oxygen to it, and then it may burst into something larger. The next thing you know, it's out of control. So you want to maintain all your equipment, your vehicles, power tools, and stuff like that. Make sure they don't generate any sparks. Protect your home by having heavy-duty windows, use non-combustible materials, and keep siding a few inches off the ground. I didn't know that. Didn't even think about that. But you want to keep your siding a few inches off the ground. Think about it. Siding is combustible material as a general rule. I mean, it's made out of man-made stuff.
Right.
So it could be easily combustible, but keeping it a few inches off the ground can keep something from starting or escalating rapidly, I guess you might say.
Okay.
Okay.
I would have never thought that.
I didn't either. What cities can do to prevent wildfires, they must ensure that water resources are proportionate to their population density and potential fire hazards. And I think that's one of the issues that they're contending with in California and a lot of other places is we don't necessarily have the water resources available. You think you got all these fire hydrants. Well, you're only going to get so much water out of it. How far are you going to be able to stretch those hoses? In a residential area like where you live, you probably got quite a few fire hydrants. But you know
Yeah,
what?
we got a few.
Looking around the neighborhood where I live, there are a lot less fire extinguishers than we have in your area. And of course, the area we live in doesn't have the population that you have and stuff like that. But you think here you got a fire hydrant here, then the next thing you know is maybe 100 yards or 200 yards or even further down the road. So now you got to rely on that fire truck with what it has, right? And how many trucks that you have available to bring in and stuff like that. So those are a lot of things that you need to look at and think about. And how can wildfires be resolved? A long-standing and underutilized method of keeping these wildfires under control is controlled burning. Controlled burning has many benefits, such as reducing build-up vegetation, which acts as a fuel for the uncontrollable fire. And that's really, to me, that's a big thing. I was telling you earlier, we grew up, your grandfather and grandmother's best friends, Bonnie and William Gallops. He was a fire marshal, and she always did the fire tower. But the county always did in certain areas, and you don't do them every year. About every 2, 3, 4 years, something like that. You need to have in those densely populated areas, have controlled burnings and stuff. So you want to keep flammable materials away from the heat sources. Inspect your electrical cords and appliances for damages. Good fire extinguisher. You need to have a fire escape plan. And some of the things I've heard about these people in California, a lot of them had a fire escape plan. And you want to make sure your smoke detectors are tested regularly. It's easy to forget about them. They should be checked about once a month. I didn't realize that. Think about it.
Yeah.
And like I said, only a minute is needed which could make all the difference in an emergency. In fires. Make sure you got good working smoking fire extinguishers. Some of the other things, unfavorable water conditions, what we talked about earlier, can turn a controlled burn into a wildfire. So you got to make sure when you do controlled burns, it has to be done by experts who know what they're doing. Because if you don't do it right, you can have a worse disaster. You can make it even worse.
Yeah, and you need to make sure that the weather conditions are favorable, like it's not too windy, not too dry. And the whole purpose of a controlled burn is to burn off an area to where if there is a wildfire, it won't spread because once it gets to the part that's already burned, there's nothing left for it to burn. So that's why they do those controlled burns.
Yeah, the U.S. Fire Service estimates between 4,000 and 5,000 prescribed burns are completed annually by the federal land management agencies. Though 99% of these are successful, meaning they remain contained. States across that use a controlled burn in Arkansas, in 2017, they had 34,000 plus prescribed fires that burned 215,000 acres. Florida in 21, Kansas led the West in prescribed fire use in 21. Missouri and Texas supports prescribed fire infiltration, prescribed burning by the board that regulates, and some others. Prescribed fire can help prepare for wildfires, improving watersheds, and rejuvenate wildlife. Backburning can be highly effective if it's done correctly. Okay? Backburns or prescribed burns are an effective way to reduce the risk of catastrophic fires. The temporary risk works to prevent those same risks from happening on a much larger and deadlier scale. So, like you said, it depends heavily on proper management, suitable weather conditions, and they should only be conducted by trained professionals in controlled environments, or you have a worse situation. The key points about a controlled burn is reduce the wildfire risk, improves habitat. I didn't think about that. In certain ecosystems, controlled burns can stimulate the growth of native plants by clearing out competing vegetation and encouraging seed germination. And there's a lot of states in this process. Every year they will plant new trees. They'll grow into where these prescribed burnings or places are, where we've had them, and they'll plant new trees and stuff like that. They can manage invasive species. So there's a lot of positive things it has. It can have an impact on wildlife. While generally designed to minimize harm, some animals may be affected by a controlled burn, particularly if not properly timed and successfully done. So when you look at that kind of stuff, and you look at the animals that is affected in those particular areas, pretty much have an idea of the migration system and those kind of things. Some key points about backburning. One is the function. It's deliberately setting a fire in front of an advancing wildfire to consume fuel and cause a fire break, preventing the main fire from spreading further. That was another thing I remember. I went with my dad a couple of times with William, and they used to do a lot of fire breaks on the back of the truck that William had. And this brought up some good memories for me going back to those 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old type things. And they used to do a lot of fire breaks and stuff like that. So keep the fire from jumping from one area to another area.
Yeah, how big does a fire break usually have to be? Just a couple of feet across and a few inches deep?
I didn't really see it, but if I remember correctly, probably about 4 to 6 feet. And you're right, a couple inches. I know William, they had a tractor, had like a tiller, and that tiller had like 4 or 5 discs on it. Okay, so you're talking about it was probably about 5 foot wide when you look at it from an angle type thing. So he'd do 2 or 3 of those in an area to keep it, and it was done on a annual basis or a semi-annual or every 2 or 3 years, something like that, depending on the area and the county that had the most vegetation or the most opportunities for wildfire, stuff like that.
So I just did a quick search here in the Texas A&M agrilife.org. They recommend 10 times the height of the flammable vegetation within the burn unit. So they're saying if it's just like grassy areas, then it needs to be 100 feet. If it's grassy area with cedar, then it needs to be 300 feet.
Okay.
A grassy with sand, shinnery oak, whatever that means, 200 feet. Sagebrush with sand and grass, 200 feet. If it's just leaf litter, then 50 feet, and forest understory of leaf litter fuels with cedar, 300 feet. I don't know what some of that terminology means, but basically it's 10 times, I guess, the size of the area that could burn
Well,
in height.
you're talking about cedar. Cedar, it's kind of hard to get it to start, but once it starts, it burns for a long time. If you put cedar wood in a fireplace, it's hard to get it started. But once you put it in, of course, it's going to have an odor to it too.
Yeah.
But it will burn. It gives you a lot of heat real quick, and once you start it, but it will burn for a long time. Where a lot of other wood, and that's why it's so important that when you do this kind of things, that the wildfire management people are the ones who do it. Certain types of wood will burn quicker than other types, so you got to know the nature of the forest and things like that. And I'm a really true believer in forest management. I
Me
understand.
too.
I understand. Sometimes we like to go and look at things, but sometimes you need to. Sometimes you just got to sacrifice some things.
I look at it the way from my youth, particularly my time in the scouts, with doing the merit badges, the hiking, the camping, all of that stuff. And you learn about ecology and soil erosion and things like that. And one of the things that they always had taught us when you go out into the wilderness, you try to leave it better than how you found it.
Exactly.
Like on your campsite, if you had a fire, you make sure it's completely out, completely covered up. You clean up all of the debris you may have left, just all of that stuff.
And all of this stuff we're talking about, that's one of the bigger problems with wildfires that's caused, not necessarily on purpose, but through negligence or a lack of understanding or other reasons that you might get caught up in with time and not have the time to do what you need to do. So it's about planning. If you're going to go camping, you got to do some planning. You got to pick the right campsite, and then You got to do something, and that's where back to what you're talking about. I think it's so important that young adults or young kids that are involved in scouting and these other organizations that does things like that, because those are life lessons that you learn. You don't necessarily need them, but if something ever happens, you you have something to
Yeah.
kind of fall back on that kind of gives you that.
Yeah, I mean, we live in this world, so we should know how to live in the world.
Exactly.
Because, when we started out, our ancestors didn't live in houses with concrete and electricity and running water.
And that's, talk about the Californians. Just listen to some of the people. A lot of the problems that those people are going to face now is when those homes were built, there were certain conditions that apply. But in the
Regulations and
meantime,
codes, yeah.
certain things have happened. Codes have changed. Material specifications have changed and stuff like. So it's
Let's
going
just
to.
call it what it is. It's bureaucracy
It is. So it's going to be that much more difficult
to
uh,
rebuild. Yeah.
to rebuild.
The permits that it takes, the materials, like you said, because of the bureaucracy and the rules that have changed, what you used to be able to build with, you can't build with now because it's toxic or whatever.
Right. So that's it's a mess, and hopefully we'll figure this out.
Isn't that why Uncle Leonard stopped working out in California? Because it was just too expensive business wise for him.
Exactly.
Because he's a painter.
He's a
And,
painter.
the paint is toxic and he couldn't store things in certain areas. You know what I'm saying? The regulation was too burdensome. That's why he left.
He could make more money by working from home here in Texas and traveling out there because and your Aunt Terry used to he used to work on a lot of like bridges, repainting those bridges up. Well, that guy he would make more money because he was here versus out there, and not just California, a lot of other states.
Anywhere.
Yeah, out towards the West Coast. So there's a lot to be said about it.
So tomorrow's supposed to be the coldest day. I haven't been keeping up with how cold, but my wife tells me it's probably going to start snowing tomorrow evening
Yeah,
or afternoon.
tomorrow evening, tomorrow night, Tuesday morning.
Yeah, we've already got delayed reporting for work on Tuesday. That message came out Thursday or Friday. I know it was Friday.
I know some of this. I know UTSA has already made plans to close Tuesday. I think Northeast is closed. Northside is waiting to see what happens, and some of the other school districts.
Where Mackenzie's doing her internship, I need to find out if that school or that district has been closed for Tuesday as well, because she's supposed to start her internship there on Tuesday.
Yeah. So it's you just don't know what happened. To me, you better err on the side of good judgment than you are anything else. If the risks are there, the possibility of those risks are there, what's another day? What's another 2 days compared to those people who could be injured permanently or killed or lose a lot of property because they have certain things to do?
Or the fact that, like you just said, if you cause an accident, now you're taking first responders away from somebody who truly might need it more than the accident that you caused. And not saying the accident wouldn't be like a bad accident, which would require, hospitalization or anything like that. But usually fire, the EMS is called out there.
And that's another point. How about the safety of those first responders? Sometimes we don't think about that. Well, they have families too. They
Yeah.
have lives, even though they're putting them, and they're always usually the first ones to run in to help us. But sometimes we don't think about it. That's why the people who are careless should be prosecuted. I'm just going to say it like it is. If you're careless and you do stupid stuff like that, then you should be prepared for the consequences because
Yeah, I agree.
you're endangering a whole lot of people besides yourself. But anyway,
What was that quote by John Wayne? Life's hard. It's even harder when you're stupid.
yeah, something like that. And I think there's a lot of stupid folks out there. We got a lot of good folks out there too. So all of you good folks, give us some feedback. Tell us how we're doing. How many downloads we got this month?
10. We haven't been consistent. That's probably one. Maybe they just don't want to hear us always talking about Alabama football. That very well could be. It's hard to come up with a topic. At first, I thought you and I could do, us doing our out and about, but we don't get out and about as much. And even when we did, we still weren't going out that much to have like a regular podcast. And it's just tough to come up with, topics. I, like I said, I didn't want us to do politics or political slant conversations because one, you alienate at least 50% of your possible audience. And two, there are others out there that are doing it and doing it better. And you're just, competing in that wilderness for attention or likes or downloads. Today, TikTok went dark because of the ban. It's now, yeah, they can't find a buyer to here in America for TikTok to stay in business because it's still Chinese owned and they
So,
are using it to spy on us.
what are your thoughts on TikTok? I've never
It's
been on their website. I have no idea what they do, what's on there.
They're just short little video skits, or people have cooking shows on them. People have little shows on how to do certain things. They do funny dances, and it's just entertainment, for whatever somebody wants to do. Tell jokes,
Yeah, I've read several
do
articles about
stunts.
people saying they lose some revenue, and some of them not a whole lot of revenue because they make money, I guess, doing the videos or whatever, and stuff like that.
Well,
I'm
yeah, it's
all,
like if you have a good YouTube show, a good podcast, a good TikTok channel, whatever, if you have enough downloads, people are going to want to advertise because they want to put their money where people have their eyeballs.
yep. Well, that's the free enterprise system. We just need to have some controls that people don't have access to personal information or information that can hurt us. There's a
But see, here's
country.
the problem. There's no free lunches in life. And if a product is free, then you are the product. I mean, that's it. So if you're on social media and you're doing it for free, they are selling and making money off of your views. The algorithms are targeting you, and that's where the advertisers are following.
So we'll see in the next few days and the coming months what's going to happen, huh?
We shall find out. Here in America, we will find out. Tomorrow starts a new day, a new regime. We'll see what the next 4 years will hold.
Well, I would like to think there's probably a lot of, well, I won't say a lot because I guess they're talking about in the billions to buy TikTok, 22 billion, something like that. I don't remember the number, but I would imagine there'd be. I know O'Leary. I've heard a couple of his some of his feedback and stuff like that, how he could work and people could purchase it and pretty much do what our Congress is saying we need to do in controlling the who has access to our personal information.
Well, alrighty. We're at that time where we need to hose her down
Well, we hope everybody stays warm and listen to the
and
weather
safe.
reports and do what's best for them.
All I care about is not losing power and no busted water pipes. That's all I want to get through. That's the only thing that keeps me up at night these days.
Yep, I went to HEB yesterday, and there's a Walmart, a little neighborhood store that's close by. I like to go to because it has a lot more selections on, especially in their food department, their frozen food stuff like that. Make sure I have enough stuff to last the next couple of days if it does turn bad.
Yeah, I hear you.
Be safe.
You
Stay
too, old
warm.
man. All right.
I'm gonna stay in the house. I'm gonna keep my sweatshirt on, and I'm gonna keep this thermal undershirt on underneath it, and I'm gonna keep some socks on, and I'll be all right.
I'll just keep my long shirt on, long sleeve rather.
All right.
All right, y'all take care, everybody.
I'll see you
See you
down the
around.
road.
All
Love you
right.
guys.
Love you guys. Bye.